excited. We are so excited here at Union Baptist Church. This building for the new Child Enrichment Center here at Union is almost completed. They are working hard, getting it ready for us to open up in August. We have families ready to bring the children here so they can learn about Jesus and be taken care of throughout the week, every day, Monday through Friday. We still have a few spots available. If you have a need for childcare, call the church office at 865-687-4500 or go to the church website at discoverunion.org. If you're interested in full-time or part-time employment, there are a few positions still available also. So please be in prayer for this ministry. We're just so excited to get this thing open and started and teaching the children in the community about Jesus. Just be in prayer, like I said, especially. And if you feel led to give financially, please do so. But most of all, just be excited with us, and we look forward to having the community be a part of this new ministry union. Thank you.
Billy Graham once said, if a person gets his attitude toward money straight, it'll help straighten out almost every other area of his life. Perhaps no issue creates more personal stress, splits more marriages, alienates more friends, motivates more crime, and stimulates more sinful behavior than money. The preacher's going to talk about money. Why? Well, there are over 2,000 verses in the Bible that discuss our attitude toward possessions. So I have to share some of those. That's why the Bible contains 5 times as many references on our use of wealth as it does about prayer. Jesus spoke more about money than he did about heaven and hell combined. The Lord wants us to get our attitude toward possessions straight. That's why Jesus said this in Matthew 6. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Here's the key verse. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. That's where your focus is where your treasure is. So what we do with things God has given us is very important to the Lord. And so we are given this task to be stewards of His possessions. We don't use that word very much anymore. Stewards. What's a steward? It simply means manager. You and I have been given this ability to be managers. We are management. Now, we're probably lower management, but we're management. Management of the stuff that God has given us. How are you managing what God has given you? You see, because everything you have, God has given to you. God has given to you. The book of Proverbs details some basic principles on possessions given by the wisest man ever depicted in the Bible, King Solomon. He was very, very wealthy. And so he teaches us to keep possessions in perspective. In God's economy, the necklace you wear, the car you drive, the home you live in are just temporary things. But your salvation and your relationship with the Lord are eternally priceless. So to really keep our possessions, our things, our stuff in perspective, we have to adhere to what God has to say. And so as we're going through our series on wisdom, we need wisdom, all of us. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how little money you have. It doesn't matter how much stuff you have or how little stuff you have. We all need wisdom when it comes to possessions. And so I want us to look at some biblical ideas that enlighten us in becoming wise about possessions. Here's the first one. The dangers of possessions. There are always dangers of possessions. You know, before I had my very first car, I didn't have any worries about maintenance or insurance or gas or any of those things. My parents took care of it. Why? I drove one of their cars. But once I possessed the car, once I bought my own car, it caused stress, it caused time issues, it cost money. The same thing with a house. Before I ever owned a house, I didn't have any stress with the house and maintaining the house and insurance on a house and mortgage and all that stuff. Any other possession we own, we have some dangers in it. Here's the first danger. Possessions invite strange behavior. People act really strange about possessions. Proverbs 1, verse 10 says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us have one purse." Somebody's tempting this guy. "Come on and join us. We're going to go get some stuff. We're going to go do some damage. We're going to plunder and get some stuff from people." But that details the dangers of stuff. Money can cause people to choose some evil behavior. For the most part, we have a desire for more and more things. I don't know why that is, but we do, don't we? Nothing wrong with things. As a matter of fact, we all own things, but the problem is when the things own us. Some people are possessed by their possessions. It consumes them. And so this Proverbs passage details how possessions tempt people into lying and deception. Proverbs 21:6 reads, "Getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death." And so from expense accounts to income tax forms to resumes, human nature is to gain treasure by whatever means necessary. In 2001, George O'Leary was hired as the head coach of Notre Dame football. He said, "It is my dream job." But here's what happened. 5 days into his job, he was fired. He embellished his resume. He said he did some things that he didn't do. And so his temporary success turned into a total loss of millions of dollars and, by the way, integrity. Proverbs 16:19 says, "Better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud." Because possessions tempt people to reject their moral values just to gain a little bit of something, to gain a temporary wealth. Proverbs 15:6, "In the house of the righteous there is much treasure, but in the revenue of wicked is trouble." 28:6 says, "Better the poor man who walks in his integrity than one who's perverse, though he is rich." Integrity is important. God thinks integrity, moral standards are important. In college, my first semester in college, I received this cool piece of stuff in the mail. And it said this: "If you'll apply for this credit card, you'll get this." It promised increased credit line. It promised you'll have this great future. It promised how I needed, described it how I needed it. It would build that. It would give me buying power. It promised all these things. It says, "We'll help you get started off on the right foot financially." What they didn't tell me was it would cause me to go into debt for years to come. Here's another danger of possessions. They instill a false sense of security. Possessions instill this false sense of security. Just because I think I have something, it gives me security in life. Well, that's not true. I don't care how many storage buildings you have or how many places you store stuff, how many closets, garages, and attics. Just because you have stuff doesn't give you security. Proverbs 18:11, "The rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own esteem." Do we fail to comprehend that riches can be removed in an instant? Lawsuit, divorce, stock market crash, gone. All this stuff. Proverbs 23:5 says, "Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven." Money provides this false security. It may be here today, but it's gone the next. There's another one. Possessions increase anxiety. That's true. Possessions increase anxiety. Ecclesiastes 5:12 illustrates this. "The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep." Society tells us the more you have, the more secure you are, and the more peace you have, but that's just not true. The opposite is true, as a matter of fact. The more you have, the more you have to protect and polish and paint and insure and pay and taxes on and store and on and on. John Ortberg is a pastor, and in his book, The Life You've Always Wanted, related this, that he and his wife bought a piece of furniture years ago. It was a new furniture, new sofa. It was a mauve sofa, if you remember that color, mauve sofa. He said the man at the furniture store warned us, once he found out we had kids, don't get that mauve sofa. He said, you get something the color of dirt. That'll be good for you with your kids. But we said, we know how to handle our kids, so we want this mauve sofa. So they got the mauve sofa. And from that moment on, he says, we all knew clearly rule number one in our house. Don't sit on the mauve sofa. Don't touch the mauve sofa. Don't play around the mauve sofa. Don't eat on, breathe on, or even think about that mauve sofa. He said, remember the forbidden tree in the Garden of Eden? On every other chair in the house you may eat freely. But on this sofa, on this mauve sofa, you shall not eat or sit. For on the day you sit thereon, you shall surely die. He said days later, to her horror, his wife discovered a jelly stain on the mauve sofa. So she lined up her 3 children and she asked for a confession. Ortberg said there was silence for the longest time. No one said a word. He said, I knew the children wouldn't, for they had never seen their mother so upset. I knew they wouldn't, for if they did, they would sit out in eternity in the timeout chair. I knew they wouldn't because I was the one who put the jelly stain on the mauve sofa, and I wasn't saying a word to her about it. You know it's true. The more you have, the more tension it brings in life. The blue-collar worker can leave his job and rest at night, while the broker who has millions invested wrangles at night worrying what's going on halfway around the world. Possessions, number 4, implant ingratitude. They cause us to be not very grateful. They implant ingratitude. Proverbs 27:7 says, a satisfied soul tramples on the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. In other words, if you're really hungry, any food tastes good. But if you're full, you don't even enjoy the filet mignon, and you complain about how it's cooked. Too much of this world's goods will spoil us, and if we're not careful, nothing will please us anymore. Bigger, better, more. It's a dulling of the senses. We all get it, and we get, and we get, and we still want. Our greed overpowers our need. You don't need it. You're just greedy and you want it. Martha Stewart is worth millions, even after she came out of prison. But she once said this, I have a beautiful weekend house in the Hamptons. But as it turns out, it's not my dream house. There's no view of the ocean that I desire. It does not have the rustic wood floors that I absolutely crave. It doesn't have the quiet water of a shallow lagoon where I can pick my plants. You know what? No matter what you've got, nothing can satisfy. Ecclesiastes 5:11. By the way, Solomon wrote that too. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? So here's today's philosophy. Spend whatever you have without being thankful for your blessings. Possessions invite strange behavior. They instill a false sense of security. They increase anxiety. They implant ingratitude. Here's the last one. Possessions invert our priorities. They turn things upside down. They invert our priorities. They become an obsession. They crowd out Jesus Christ. They crowd out our family and things that are really important. Have you ever wondered who the Joneses are? Why are we trying to keep up with them? That old saying, well, I'm just trying to keep up with the Joneses. Why? Why? We become so miserable because the chances increase that we may lose our family, we may lose our spiritual relationship with God because we're obsessed with this and it consumes our very life. And when the Israelites were entering the Promised Land, Moses gave them some advice in Deuteronomy 6. I think it's going to be on the screen. Look what he says. So it shall be when the Lord your God brings you into the land in which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. And when you have eaten and are full, then beware, lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Boy, that describes us. God has given us so much stuff, and we've forgotten God. We've forgotten where we've come from. Proverbs 38 declares, remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who's the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. There are some dangers when it comes to possessions. Beware of those. But then there are some potentials. The second thing I want you to see, the potential for possessions. Tremendous assets. You know, when you go to the ocean, there are a lot of dangers there. The surf may be strong, the undercurrent may pull you out or pull you under. Sharks may be close. Jellyfish may come along and sting you and cause some pain. But along with those dangers, what are there? There's pleasure. There's a refreshing swim. You can build sand castles. You can walk on the beach. Just the quietness. There's dangers to possessions, but there's also potentials. I hope you write these down. Possessions can be the reward for obedience. Possessions can be the reward for obedience. Proverbs 3, verses 1 and 2 says, my son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. What will? If you keep my commands. God often blesses people if they walk in obedience to His principles. We don't emphasize that much because the health and wealth gospel preachers, the prosperity preachers, have exaggerated it and proclaimed that if you practice it, you'll always be healthy and rich. If you'll just do what God says, if you just have enough faith, if you'll just, then you'll be healthy and wealthy and wise. That's not what the Bible says. It teaches that if we walk with God in obedience, then He will bless us. If I walk with God in obedience, He will bless me. Relationships and character and wisdom are far more significant blessings than money. Sometimes obedience brings blessings in the form of possessions, though. Abraham, Job, David in the Bible all had enormous possessions. Malachi said this, if we tithe, if we give, God will open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing. Well, that's simple. Oh, I can't do that. I can't give to God. I don't have enough money. Okay, then don't get that blessing. If we'll tithe, he's talking about 10% back in the Old Testament, then God will open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing. You don't want it? Okay, then don't give. Jesus said this, give and it'll be given back to you. You don't want anything given back to you? Then don't give. The Apostle Paul said this, you reap what you sow. So riches can be achieved by evil means, but sometimes possessions can be God's tangible reward for being obedient, for obedient living. Proverbs 22:4, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. That's how you get it, by fear and humility in the Lord. Secondly, possessions can provide a reasonable sense of security. A minute ago we said they're not total for security, but they can provide a reasonable sense of security. Proverbs 10:15 says this, the rich man's wealth is his strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. Wealth is a fortress and provides security for you and your family. It's okay to save money. It's okay to put money back for a rainy day. It's okay to invest in your children's college fund. It's okay to have 401ks and all those. It's okay. Nothing wrong with any of that. It's some security. Poverty has no influence whatsoever. Doesn't help you at all, does it? Food, shelter, clothing, and reasonable lifestyle, that's a reasonable sense of security. That's called wisdom. You're using that for the future. But I heard this. The average American dies with only $200 in their savings account. Isn't that crazy? $200. The average American has $200 saved away in their savings account. If you don't have to lie awake wondering how you feel and clothe your family, that's a sense of security and blessing. God's blessed you with that. Thirdly, possessions can be a resource of joy. stuff that we have can be a resource of joy. Ecclesiastes again, 5:19. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is a gift of God. God has blessed and given us those things. If you're happy on your job, with your possessions He's given you, you're not jealous over what others have, over what the Joneses have, you are the rich kid after all. What a blessing God has given us. God is pleased to give us good gifts, and when we're grateful and content, we honor God by our attitude. I think it has to do with a lot of that. James 1:17 says this, every good gift, every perfect gift is from above, and it comes down from the Father of lights, to whom there is no variation, there's no shadow of turning. So let's apply this. There's some principles here, and they're real simple. The Bible teaches that all the possessions in the world can't do this. Here's the principles, and I hope you'll write these down. Possessions cannot, will not make you happy. They're just not going to. Oh, they will for a few minutes, a little while. But they get old. They rust. Moths come in and eat, just like Jesus said. Goes out of style. Ecclesiastes 5:10, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with its increase. This is also vanity. Christina Onassis was the daughter of billionaire Aristotle Onassis, who Jackie Kennedy married. He was a billionaire. She said this, happiness is not based on money. The greatest proof of that is my family. They're torn to pieces over money. Proverbs 15:16 says, better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure with trouble. It's better to have a little bit and fear and honor the Lord than to have all this trouble and bring on you not have God at all. Some of the most miserable people in the world have turmoil and despair because money has not lived up to the hype that it makes them happy. You've seen families that have been ripped apart because of money, haven't you? They're suing each other. They're not speaking to each other, all because of a will or money or land. Relationships are so much more important than any of that. There are some of you, maybe even here today, who are at odds over possessions with people you ought to be close to. Things have divided you. Happiness is going to evade you until you recognize they're just temporary things. It's estimated that $30 trillion will be inherited in the next 30 years. Inherited. That's the baby boomer generation who's going to give it to their kids. $30 trillion just in the United States. But the result is a significant percentage of children and grandchildren who are fighting for what they believe is their fair share. Michael Furr, who is a chief financial planner with Sage Vest Wealth Management, says this. He said, this trend is happening as adult children are not sufficiently saving for their own retirement, and so they get caught up short. And it's further complicated by adult children who feel entitled to their parents' money. They've lived their lives under the assumption that their inheritance will fund their retirement plans. So they didn't plan for it, and they're hoping their inheritance from their parents is going to help with their retirement plans. Now listen, when an aging parent dies, death is agonizing enough without the added pain of what is called heir warfare. The heirs fighting each other. It happens all the time. They fight for tooth and nail, for watches and stocks and land and stuff. It's just not worth it. Maybe we ought to be like the ancient Scandinavians. When one of their kings died, here's what they did. They would put all of his treasures and his body, place it on a barge, push it out in the water, and set it on fire. If his kids wanted that stuff, they had to go get their own. But seriously, we need to make some time to do some estate planning. You say, well, I don't need to hear that from my pastor. I'm not telling you. God's Word is. You need to save for the future. You need to think about the future. I believe if you're over 21 years old, you should have a will. If you don't, you're just risking the state to do what they want to do with it. Give it to whoever they say. Many people refuse to talk about a will. Oh, I don't want to talk about a will. That's more, but it's about death and dying. Well, you're going to die. You know you're going to die. So plan on what to do with the possessions you have. Listen, I have been witness to families who fight over petty possessions which would have been alleviated if the will would have been in place. It's not worth it. Ecclesiastes 6:3 says this: if a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. That's a very interesting verse, isn't it? You've got all these kids, you live many years, but you're not satisfied with the good things of life. You'd better off being not even born. You know what? No one wants to come to your funeral to mourn for you because you've neglected your relationships and trusted in your finances. They want to come mourn for you because you've built relationships, not finances. What good are all those financial things if you don't love each other? Secondly, possessions are no substitute for character. Not just about joy, happiness, but it's about character. Possessions are no substitute for character. Proverbs 16:16. How much better to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. Your character matters. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Your character counts. Who you are when no one's looking, when no one knows what you're deciding, when no one is around you, that's what counts. Rick Allison is a publisher of a magazine about Dallas, Texas, called simply D. He flipped through an advanced copy of an issue and saw there were 2 ads that he considered obscene. It was too late. Copies of D were already on their way to the newsstands, but he didn't hesitate. He called and they ordered all the trucks to make a detour. Here's what he said: take all those to the recycling center and shred every single issue. 70,000 copies were shredded. It was a huge financial loss. But the Wall Street Journal said this: it was a costly decision for Allison, but honor, justice, and reputation were more important to him than a profit. Proverbs 16:8 says, better is a little with righteousness than vast revenues without justice. Here's the last one. Possessions cannot save you. Possessions cannot save you. Proverbs 11:4, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. When your life is over, when you stand before God, all the money in the world will do you no good, because nothing's going with you. Nothing's going into eternity with you but your soul. What's going to matter in that day of wrath that Proverbs calls it is your relationship with the Lord. That's all it's going to